Hi, I am Tiphyah. I want to introduce you to our next segment. This one is titled Word of the Day.
Welcome back. We're happy that you've joined us. We're going to start out as our talking head has already announced with our segment. So we're going to just give a little disclaimer here to begin with. Basically, the content, some of the content that you're going to see, we want to make sure that you understand that according to copyright material fair use, Section 107 of the Copyright Act, we are going to be sharing the materials that are allowances are made for. So the fair use for purposes such as the criticisms, the comments, news reportings, teaching, scholarships, and education and research, which is our sharing of the information to you is based on the research. So we want to make sure that we use the disclaimer, the fair use disclaimer that says that we are permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing the use for research and the purposes of teaching. Today, we are making sure that you understand that we are coming to you with a non-infringement purpose for sharing some of the information that you might see. So with that, we're going to take we're going to pause and move on over and get started with our first segment of the day, which has been announced, which is our word of the day. So let's go ahead and take a look at the word of the day. The word of the day today is the word Hebrew. This is pronounced phonetically as he, H-E, brew, the long O sound, B-R-O-O, which is a noun. What does this word mean? It is defined as a descendant of Abraham, who is known as the father of the Hebrew nations, also of Isaac and Jacob. Jacob, we also know, is also called Israelite. So we want to understand that under the earliest language written, it was in Hebrew. The original scrolls, which provide the prophecies of the Israelite nations, was in Hebrew originally. Now, there is an Arab component in the ancient name of Africa. We talked about, where did that name Africa come from? So I wanted to bring to you further research that I came across on that one. And that one basically, from an Arabic terminology, means fruit or respectively friki and parika. So the meaning of, or the pronunciation, I should say, al-bulan, ak-bulan, is defined as the mother of mankind or the Garden of Eden. And so that is our word of the day. We want to move along now, take a segment break, and we're going to move along to our next segment. We'll be right back with you.
This is Tiphyah. I am your talking head. The next segment is the genealogy topic. Let's get started.
Right. So basically, we're going to talk a little bit today. I'm going to give you a little bit about my background and why and how I came to have a passion about genealogy and the research involved in genealogy. My own journey timeline, in a sense. I began with my mom, who was my mentor and my supporter. I didn't even realize that she was laying the foundation for what God had already put in me, and that was the passion and the desire to do research on family lineage and to be very instrumental in the research that has been provided to my family today to carry on through generations as we go forward. But as I prepared for this podcast, one of the things I thought about was my beginning as a child, because mom never came to me and said, "Okay, I'm going to be your mentor in making sure that this family history goes on. She had an interest, and I was the child that took an interest and then wanted to be nurtured in that interest. And so, what I can say to each of you is that there is a genealogist that has been given the passion to continue every family's lineage and the record keeping, and that is inherent as a gesture, I think, that we have been given from God as a family to make sure that someone takes a serious interest, someone who has been birthed into the earth within each of our family structures will make sure that the information about the family will be organized in a way that each generation can learn from whence they came, thereby making it a lot easier to acclimate into where it is that they are understanding and having passions about going. But if we don't have this as a foundation, we kind of walk around aimlessly, not knowing the whys behind the desires and the passions that we have in them. So it's a very intricate part, I believe, and have come to understand about building the wholeness of a person. So let's keep that in mind. But as I recall, as a child, we would every summer we would get in the station wagon with my parents and my brothers and sisters. And I come from a family of total of 8 people. I've got 2 brothers and 3 other sisters. One of the sisters, of course, is no longer with us, as mom and dad both have gone on home as well. But we would always prepare for these vacations, and we would drive down to Mississippi, where my dad and my mom both were from, which is where they met. And usually my dad's brothers, it would be more than just us. We would caravan. There would be a lot of the cars and the other family members, our cousins. We would caravan oftentimes, and sometimes we wouldn't. Sometimes it would just be our family. And so there was a scheduled gathering annually every year. For our family. We would come together as family in the larger family where my grandfather lived and my great grandfather and his father. And we would caravan down and gather ourselves together. And the elders would sit and they would tell stories. And we as a children would often be found sitting and listening to the stories. There would be a fire that would be built outside of my grandfather's house. And we would sit in the yard and the elders would be talking and sharing the stories of what things were like when they were growing up. And it was a very enriching time for me, I can say, for my life. And so we would also do the same with my mother. So on these visits, we would not only visit my father's family, but we would visit my mother's family. And so it was a very family intensive opportunity to get to know the family as a whole, because we were living and growing up in Colorado. So the only way we would have known the depths of our family and my mother's and father's ancestral families was through these travels, because they didn't live where my mother and father transplanted to before I was born. And so these visits then became more of what I now know to be the foundation of what I wanted to see more of. And they were a part of my mother's father and my father's desire. They always wanted to attend family reunions, and there was always one every year, because my dad would have one year and mom would have one the next one. And so they began to grow and become more matured in that we would do things that were significant. The visits would become very focused, and the things that we would do then would be to kind of pull ourselves together and gather in ways that we might visit the grave sites of those that had gone on, and start doing some of that real important family bonding work that helped us to tie together, looking at some of the materials that were created by the earlier ancestors. So all of this fed into who I am today, and why this particular topic of generations has become the focus of this particular venue. So with that, so after years of that, of course, I have come to be able to look into family genealogy with an eye of more experience and more depth, books and things that I have and have accumulated and have actually written that have been put together with the family history have all been a part of the desire that I have now to give back that knowledge and that understanding and that wisdom that I have gained to those who also have that genealogist in their family and they're wanting to learn. So we're going to spend some time on those kinds of things. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the foundational work that I can tell you that I've come to. And so I want to go ahead and share with you real quick. I think it will be important to go into this. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to make sure that I'm sharing this because sometimes if I don't tell it to share, I hope so. Let me make sure I got this together. Yeah, okay. So we're already sharing. And what I want to do is show you then we take a look at the end result of some of what the research shows, and then we'll come back and I'll talk a little bit more. But let's get to my first diagram here. So one of the things that I want to show you is what it looked like, what it basically when for me and what I can share with you is the 7 generations that I have been particularly a part of and constructing and developing for my family and the understanding of what that looks like and just give you a general overview. So let's see if I can bring this up and kind of magnify it a little bit. There we go. All right, let's see if we can get this. I'm not sure what that is. So we're going to put it right over there. All right. So basically, what we're looking at here, let me just move this over here and kind of get that over, is the family 7 generations is the way that I've diagrammed this so that you might understand what are the big, what the end result looks like. We'll go back and look at some of the research pieces that were about developing this. But when I use the term 7 generations, what I'm talking about is doing the research from the first generation, which would have been my 4th generation grandfather, I think it was. Yes, 4th generation grandfather. So we're going back now to my 4th generation great grandfather. And we're talking about the early 1800s now. And then his son would have been my 2nd generation or my great grandfather. And this is the way that the research that I mapped out is that I looked at my father's side, which is the paternal grandpa side of the family, and then also the maternal side of my grandfather's family. So his mother being the maternal and his father being the paternal, and was able to go back at least to those first and second generations based on our record to the early 1800s and identify who our grandfather was through these visits that I had and the interest that I had. So we've got the paternal side, we've got the maternal side, we've got the first and second generation, 1800s. We moved to the 1900s around that 3rd generation. We're in our 1900s. And so now we're looking at our grandpa, we call him Grandpa Walter. Grandpa Walter lived 100 years. And so we have records on his life and his father. And then, of course, we go on down to the 5th generation, who is I'm sorry, Grandpa Walter was the 3rd generation. And then his dad would have been the 4th generation. My dad is the 5th generation. And then I come in under my dad as the 6th generation. And now I am a grandmother. So I have grandchildren now who are now the 7th generation of the family tree. And so this much of our family has been documented, recorded, and we are building upon that to the point now to where we've got Facebook accounts, Facebook group accounts. The reunions are continuing to move forward. The family is continuing to gather together. Now, this is the same kind of methodology that I went through in researching on my mother's side. So my mother's father, for example, and my mother's mother, for example, the paternal on both sides, my dad and my mom, is the way that I approached this research. And so, in looking at the generations, this is how we come to the family 7 generations, and on both sides. And so at this point, this is the research that I can share that I've already done. And then we want to take a look at, the next question that you might ask is okay, so you did all this research, but what are some of the ways in which you went about gathering these documents? And I think I explained, a lot of this came from conversations, from family gatherings every year and pulling data together, sitting down and talking with the elders and making notes of their oracle conversations. These were a lot of the early days of the research. And I just want to take a look because this is the kind of activity we can create now. But I want to take you back a little bit in my experience. We're going to walk it back just a bit because I want you to see some of the older versions of the files that we had. And so, for example, some of the resource pages that we were led to. When I started the research, there were places that I had never gone before, but they certainly became places on my radar in order to gather the data. National Archives and microfilm publication. These were the earliest records that were available to me. And the way that I was able to identify these records was, ironically enough, it was the church, the LDS church in Colorado. They housed microfilm publications of these ancestral records, birth records. And so I began there. And I was surprised to find out when I got there that don't ask me why those records were in their possession, but they were. And so I think it was one of those things to where they were given a contract. But don't mark me on that because I don't know. But the National Archives microfilm were the earliest records that I was able to find for these genealogy records of those 7 generations. Now, we've got a lot of methods that are currently available today to us, but what I want to do is just kind of share with you a little bit about what some of mine were. Let me go here. Trying to get back to some of these files that I'm looking to bring back. There we go. One of the other resources that I used that was very instrumental in finding records was this is just another image of those national microphones. Now, what was significant about this is that on my father's mother, we know now was a Cherokee, full-blooded Cherokee Indian. And so at the point of really researching her background, I was introduced to the knowledge that I had to start now looking at things from another perspective. And that was, where do I find the records for my dad's mom? And that's when I was introduced to the term Indian, or the Indian census rolls. And so this idea of having this Native American component took me to, okay, so how do I, research the family, her side of the family? Because at that time, we didn't know where many of them was because my grandmother died. All of the pictures of her, my father's mother, when she passed away, all of the pictures were burned because there was a fire in my grandfather's house. So I didn't have a lot of the records. She came from a big family, and we were later able to connect with that family, although they didn't have much and still don't to this day on that. So the National Archives, this is what you would have seen back in the day when I started researching, and this one probably goes back, I can't even, probably early 2007, 2003, somewhere in there, because I think that was one of the first books that we ever created, goes back that long. But that would be one of the other resources. The other thing I did is I attended workshops. I attended workshops at the library, genealogy workshops at the library, and those were very valuable. And I wanted to kind of go here. This is one of the earliest, I think, one of those early versions of the tree branches that we made for my dad's family. And so this one was for a gathering that we had in 2013. But as you can see, we'll develop into a lot more dynamics in the technology helping us. But these are some of the records, as I mentioned, we go back in the early 1800s, 1808 to 1850, for those who were at the base of the tree at that time. And then we move into the 1860s when my grandparents, this is the fourth generation, I believe, third and fourth, first and second generations are here today. Then we go up and we look at the brothers and sisters. So these are the mom and the dads at that time. And then we go into the children, and these are the children. And as you notice, some of these dates, 1895 to 1995, 1900, we're breaking the barriers right there at the 1900s. So this is one of the earlier records, but there was a lot that we were able to gather, and a lot to be learned, frankly. Oftentimes when I meet relatives, I meet them on the terms of who are your mother. If I don't know them, then the first thing I'm thinking about is who is your mother, who's your grandparent, going back a couple of generations, because I can relate more to those through those relationships. And so this is another one of those areas of foundation for me that I want to be able to share and impart when it comes to the research into the lives of others. I've got one cousin on my mom's side who's so excited. Then the next thing I told you about my dad and learning about his mother. Then we come to the other side where my mother's mother and father were both Choctaw Indians. And so now we've gotten to the point where I did the research and was able to come up with the banners of both the Choctaw Nation and the band that they would have been a part of, the Mississippi Band, and the seal of those. And so the cover page is really matured, as you can see, for the family gatherings because of this research. And the latest one, this one was July of 22. But in using the technology and advancing the knowledge, as we find, this is ongoing research. And so I'm so excited to have another cousin that is wanting to come along and do this. But it is this kind of research that we've been able to continue to do. And we appreciate the opportunity, of course, to be able to do it. But that's basically what the the foundation of my knowledge. I don't come to you from just pulling some new knowledge out of the sky. No, this has been a lot of years, and there's a passion that goes into it. And so, excuse me, in talking about it and furthering the information, there's a few other resources that I'm going to touch on briefly here, but excuse me, that have to do with the Native American research. And there's a few terms that you might have heard: the Dawes Commission records, the 5 civilized tribes, the books on that, the Mississippi Band, Choctaw, and the Cherokee Indian Roll. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs is the federal agency that is operating today with that information. The details are going to come in workshops. We'll be able to spend some time. For those of you that really want to delve in, we're going to have some live sessions that we can bring forward that will allow you to really seep in and ask questions about some of these agencies and where they are currently. Make some notes that will be instrumental in helping you to go forward. So that's basically what gives you my background and what this generation podcast, the origins of why this is an important topic, and we'll talk more about how this has needs to have someone who is making sure that the records are being kept, and the generations. You may not be able to go back 7 generations, but because it takes time, it takes years, and it's not a quick process. The other thing I want to alert you to quickly here with regard to the genealogy component of this podcast is that when you're doing data research, you must connect the dots. There's a lot of databases out there that will provide you information, but they've only made like a first name association. You can't pull from those databases without doing the foundation. If you can't find an operational link within your family for that person on any other source but that particular database, then you don't want to print information until you have done a check and balance of whether or not that name that has been given to you in a database is actually associated with someone in your particular family. Because with those general associations, what happens is if you haven't done enough of the foundational work, you'll pull it and you'll make claims, and the claims have to be vetted. They have to be researched. They have to be flushed out so that you can make sure you're not passing down wrong information to your family. It needs to be as accurate as possible. If you're going to do it, just make sure that you're aware of that. So anyway, the goal is that of course you're building a record, and the record can be as extensive and detailed as you want as you go forward. We have done all kinds of books I've done over the years where we've gotten photographs, we've gathered updated data about accomplishments. We've gotten data about marriage certificates that have been included. So there's a lot that you can do that can last many years in developing these types of relationships with the family, where they are coming to know you as the genealogist of the family. And it's a position that every family needs, along with the information that you as a genealogist needs to gather from your family members. So just be aware of all that. With that said, then, what we're going to do then is we're going to take a section break here, and we'll pause and be right back with you with the next segment of the program. We thank you again for joining. If you want to get a hold of me, remember the email address. It'll be w.prayerwarriors@gmail.com. Or you can go to the website. You can either go to the podcast website. It's generationsvibe.com. Simple way. You can get the email address and the contact information from there. generationsvibe.com. Thank you, and we'll be with you in just a few minutes.
Hi, my name is Tiphyah. That means glory in Hebrew. We want to thank you for our next segment. The focus of this segment is called Talking Heads, Trending Truth. Let's get started.
All right, okay. We thank you for sticking around for our next segment. Of course, this is our Talking Head segment. Our topic today is really about a trending truth, and we're going to build upon the conversation we were having in our last podcast, and that is this idea of understanding whether or not we can continue to say that capitalism is a success, or what would be the measure that would lead us to believe that maybe it's a failed process at this point, and then what are the factors that would create it to create the failure in the capitalism. And so we're going to kind of expand on that. I want to give you just a couple of analogies as we go forward. There's a term that is often used, and we brought this up in the last podcast, is welfare. And I think what is not used enough is the understanding, nor do we clarify it or reference it in our conversations, the corporate welfare versus the social welfare. Oftentimes, there is a difference in the conversation, and it really depends on those cartoons, the elephant or the donkey, um, as to how this term welfare is used and who's willing to use it. But what we have is a system where the elephants will often refer to welfare as only an entitlement program because of its social benefits to society, the citizens of the Constitution, we the people. And then on the other side, we have the donkeys who will often be referring to welfare and elaborating on the corporate welfare components that are being um, distributed. So they're both considered entitlement programs, but somehow the entitlements can somehow be referred to in a frame of reference in political conversations as the social welfare is often spoken about, but the corporate welfare is usually one of those that they try not to make a part of their conversations. But I think it's important for us to pull forward as a trending truth and continue to bring forth the term welfare and its uses so that we can begin to balance an understanding back to whether or not capitalism is a failed venture at this point, or if we can consider it to still be successful. And if so, then what are the components that make it either a failed system or a successful system, and what may need to be done legislatively to bring balance to that. And so with that, what I wanted to do was to start with, where we're at with regard to the entitlements for business versus the entitlements for the social programs of those that are in need of welfare services. And then we're going to kind of delve down and go deep into that. So what are the laws that gave the corporations personhood? Because this is where I think the Constitution has not been addressed, and we have not had discussions about how does this law that affected corporations affected the Constitution at its core, we the people, and what a person is. So the law that gave corporations personhood. And so this means that the corporations, well, first of all, let's talk about what the law was that gave them that. The corporations were given the right to be called or to behave like persons under the 14th Amendment. It was an amendment to our Constitution that gave businesses equal protection, okay? Meaning that they could be representative of the protections that were given to the citizens as individuals, but they were now being given this protection as a corporation. This is the significance of this is capitalism and how we rate capitalism's success or failure. One of the strongest twists, I think, in the constitutional law sits right in this particular 14th Amendment change that gave the rights to corporations to use and to challenge the laws that would regulate the economy, regulate the marketplace, and the challenges involved with their ability, the resources that they have to do so, certainly would not be the same resources that those that are being provided under the Constitution would have. An individual does not have the resources as a corporation because the budget of a corporation certainly would exceed the budget of your average family who's actually working for the corporation. So this was something that took place and there was a court case, Southern Pacific Railroad. The court held that the 14th Amendment protected the corporate because corporations are merely associations of individuals that are united for a special purpose. So this whole idea, this court case came forth, or this ruling came forth in May of 2019, but the rights of businesses were then being given those coverings under the 14th Amendment. And so this leads us back to, and then what happens with capitalism and its regulation when you have a change where corporations can now challenge the 14th Amendment and do it legitimately. So that's the piece that we want to look at. And when we're asking this question, where are we at with capitalism? Are we successful in it? And if we are, what does that look like? If we're not, what does that look like? How is our society being affected by, the discussion around this whole question? So the 14th Amendment rights, the Fourth Amendment rights of privacy and due process and equal protection, the property rights, all of these then are now, our rights under the Fourth Amendment as citizens, of course, are free speech, freedom of religion, the privacy rights, the due process, the equal protections, the property rights. So under the Constitution originally, these were the rights of the citizens. The 14th Amendment, however, has now changed that and allowed those same rights to be given to corporations, if we just look at that simply. And this information I gathered basically comes from an article that was promoted by Nation Builder, an organization called Nation Builder. So we preference that with, now let's move on. And I want to give an example of where we begin to wonder about the regulation process and how that affects the citizens. How does the corporate influence affect the citizens? Because if they are now have the right to challenge the laws, then does that affect then the quality of life for citizens? Because corporations provide services to citizens, the quality of those services can only be regulated by a government who has a superseding power over the corporation to make sure that the corporation does right by the citizens. So this all affects the change at the core of what it is that we as citizens now are being either is being reduced in our opportunities for products and quality products versus the corporation's right then to dispute or to have a right to the same right then equally while providing the products. And so when we think about the regulation of this thing, then we must look at our federal agencies. If we look at the Centers for Disease Control, if we look at the Federal Trade Commission, if we look at the new organization called, I think it's Consumer Fraud Protection Bureau, do any of these agencies really have the ability, since this amendment change, to stand up and oversee now the capitalism that is happening in the marketplace by businesses and corporations, or have the businesses and corporations now become so great in their ability to challenge that the failure now of whether or not capitalism being a success would actually continue to be what we would know it to be? Can you have a successful system of capitalism without regulation? Is the question I want you to contend with, to wrestle with in your own hearts. Because of the 14th Amendment change, it definitely has changed the dynamic. So let's look at this. When we hear the elephants on one side or the donkeys on the other one, and they're using this term welfare, we need to classify that, and we need to be intellectually knowledgeable enough to do that. Are we talking corporate welfare? Are we talking social welfare? If we talk social welfare, we cannot dismiss corporate welfare because corporations are considered to be equal citizens with us. That means that whatever welfare entitlement they're getting, it needs to be duly noted, just as well as the entitlement that is often charged to those of us that are citizens in the nation. So the example since 2020, and 2020 brings us an opportunity to really examine this, because then we can look at the differences. So in doing the research, we look at the example of 2020 on the corporate welfare side of the house. The government, our government, spent more than $30 billion on these methodologies of trying to improve upon what they called an inoculation that was going to prevent a health condition. $30 billion. Now, if we look at, and these were funds that were spent in support of, for example, Pfizer under the mRNA inoculation. There was $270 million that was spent on that alone. That meant that was an entitlement, that was a support, that was a form of welfare that went to a private corporation. In this case, it was Pfizer. So we're looking now and looking at $30 billion since 2020, and how this $30 billion in the budget was actually used. Let's go on down to another corporation. This one happened to be Moderna. Moderna then, for its clinical trials, received $1.7 billion. That was just on the trials. The National Institutes of Health also provided another $490 million to Moderna during the same time. And the manufacturing component, or the manufacturing arm, they were supported and received welfare at the tune of $108 million. So when you think about the corporate entitlement welfare component, you cannot think about it without looking at the facts of what really has been the benefit to these corporations, and then how has that replayed itself back into our society if they are receiving these funds as being recognized as persons as well. Then we go on down. We got another one that we can look at. We got 1.6 billion for research and development that was provided to Johnson & Johnson. So there's another $1 billion entitlement welfare that was given to another business that is recognized under the 14th Amendment as a person to challenge any opposition that comes against its development of products. So capitalism, and we see the receipts now. This is the disbursement of corporate entitlement welfare. And then we look at the budget, and I just wanted to just look at the overall budget of the social service programs of the entire United States government budget. And when we look at this budget, we look at an $8.6 billion figure, and that is for all social programs, for all of the United States of America. So on the social program, the people are getting $8.6 billion that covers them all. And comparison, we've got $30 billion, which may very well be included, the $8 billion included in that. But if we look at that, we're almost looking at about 5 times, or at least 4 times the amount of that money would have gone back into businesses that are able to fight then against the government challenging anything that comes with regard to their production. So capitalism, that very well, since it can be challenged, the regulations that are being used to protect the consumer can be challenged now in the same equal way that a consumer is challenging them by a corporation. We have to look at whether or not capitalism is being regulated. And if we see a big, significant group of challenges being made to those that are in business that are producing, then we must look at whether or not the regulation system is working. If the regulation system is not working, then what you will have is the reciprocal effect of a lot of claims against those products. And I think when we look at recalls and we look at the regulation and we get an understanding of whether or not there are agencies that are effectively fighting against the failed products that consumers are getting, for example, then we have to examine and ask the question, is capitalism as we are currently structured a working tool, a successful tool, or is it failing? If it's failing the citizens. And so if it is considered itself capitalism businesses, if they are considered to be people themselves, then what we've got is a dichotomy that says that people are serving in a capacity that far exceeds the capacity of any other individual, but are being given the same and equal playing field to deal with their products, which are being distributed and approved to be distributed to citizens, whether it takes their lives, it mends their lives. The number of complaints about what's going on in the marketplace has to be regulated. And if it doesn't get regulated, then I believe that we've got a failed system of capitalism. And the reason that it fails is because of a lack of regulation. And I think that if you look at some of these key factors, you will come to some conclusions. And I would love to hear some of your comments about how you think, when you lay it out, the examples of government welfare, both social and corporate, are really affecting the effectiveness of this overall society we call the United States of America. So I wanted to come back and just spend a few minutes to talk about that, because I think it's very important for us to begin to raise our level of conversation about what it is that's actually going on in our society, and then how we intend to be effective communicators about that. Thank you very much. We're going to take a pause, move to the last segment. This is a new segment that we want to introduce. We want to come back and end on a very light I note. I think it's better for us to do that. And so in order to do that, what I want to do is I want to bring us back to a focus in our last segment of our generations. And we're going to highlight generations as we do this. And so today I just want to take a few moments to highlight those that were born in the era of 1925 to 1945. These are called our silent generation. These are those that are the first members of the silent generation to serve as president. I think was John F. Kennedy. I think there's another report that says Joseph Biden, but they wouldn't be in the same category. Tom Brokaw coined the term the greatest generation, and this was his tribute to Americans who lived through the Great Depression. And I know, just from my own personal view, I know in talking to my mom, those that toughed it out through the Great Depression, I know they lived very differently, and we're kind of going into the mode of preparing in a lot of ways. You hear a lot of the emergency prep shows now that are talking about some of the greatest, some of the very preparation ideas and philosophies that emergency preparation was really the preparation during the years of depression. And then again, those that fought in World War II. So he wrote a book, I think in 1998, Tom Brokaw did, The Greatest Generation, and he popularized the terms. And we got John F. Kennedy that was born in 1917. Yes, it says he was the first member of the greatest generation to become president. Then we had Lyndon B. Johnson, we had Richard Nixon, just a fun facts, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, who is with us today, George H.W. Bush. We also were born, these were also born between 1901 and 1924. But we want to just give a shout out to those who are of that silent generation. And we'll be just wanted to do something a little fun. So we'll spend some time on these fun facts as we go forward on that. Thank you for watching, and we hope that you've enjoyed our programming and have a wonderful, wonderful day.